Why no response from government earlier? And it seems like there is an intention to hide this royal addendum.
Welcome to the Are We OK podcast, the podcast that talks about politics and public policies in ways that are relevant to you, the person on the street. My name is Dr. Bota or OKM, and with me here today,
I'm Mr. Money Peter. Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, we're doing this via online call because I'm currently in Singapore right now, and Peter is in Kota Damansara in Selangor.
That's right. So, Ken Ming, you want to start by telling us why are you in Singapore?
I'm here for this thing that takes place every year in the first working week of January called the Regional Outlook Forum that's organized by the Yusof Ishak Institute of Southeast Asian Studies. It's a conference that looks at different developments that will take place in the year, in the Asia Pacific. So the topics that were covered included things like expectations under Trump 2.0, geopolitical and regional issues, and of course some deeper dives into countries such as Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and also Thailand. And also Indonesia. So yeah, quite interesting so far. Yeah.
So does it become extra special because this year ASEAN is so close to home, and at the same time there's this whole Johor SEZ thing going on? Does it add extra flavor to this conference for this early of the year?
Surprisingly, not many questions asked about the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. I suspect because the announcement was just made a couple of days ago. But a lot of questions directed towards how Malaysia would use its ASEAN chairmanship to address the issues in Myanmar. Yeah, so a lot of questions were targeted at the two Malaysian MPs that were there, Wong Chen, the MP for Subang from PKR, and then also Saifuddin Abdullah, the Bersatu MP from Pahang, and he was also, two-time foreign minister. So Saifuddin is obviously somebody who knows his foreign policy stuff well. So yeah, it's quite a fruitful meeting, and we'll have a few more meetings before I come back to KL tomorrow. And I was here together with another podcaster as well. Khairi Jamaluddin was here because he is also an ICES fellow, and he's celebrating his birthday today, 10th of January. He's 49 this year. So happy birthday to Khairi if you are listening.
One more thing before we proceed to talk about today's topic, right, is that you took a picture with the Sultan of Perak recently, right? And a lot of people say you look very good in Songkok lah. You want to tell us what happened actually?
Yeah, I haven't worn a Songkok in a while because I don't have any official duties that requires me to wear a Songkok. But I was recently granted an audience to meet with Sultan Nazrin Shah, the Sultan of Perak, to tell him about the PPE program, the Philosophy, Politics and Economics program at Taylor's. And also to invite him to come and give a talk on the importance of institutions, in terms of economic development at Taylor's University. It's something that he wrote a very thick book about. It's called, how to industrialize, Malaysia. And he also took the opportunity to give me his latest book, which is a book about looking at the development and slight regression and hopefully redevelopment of or revival of the Perak economy from a lens of globalization. So yeah, we had a very good conversation over 1 hour, and I'm glad to say that His Royal Highness has agreed to come and give a talk at Taylor's.
So I think today our first topic of the day also has a lot to do with economics, right?
It's some to do with economics. For the second part. The first part, we're going to talk about something that has got to do with
the spicy one.
The royalty. Nothing to do with His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin, but more to do with the previous Agong, Sultan Abdullah of Pahang, and now Sultan Ibrahim, the current Agong of the current Agong, who's the Sultan of Johor. So as our readers and also our listeners would know, there was this whole issue about a royal addendum by the palace in Johor, the palace in Pahang. The palace in Pahang issued a statement to confirm that there was a royal addendum issued whereby the then Sultan, the then Agong, Sultan of Pahang, issued this addendum to say that he wanted Najib to be jailed but under house arrest. This comes in a sequence of events that we need to highlight and discuss so that our audience can be in the know. The note or the letter about the royal addendum came out on Monday, 6th of January 2025. But before that, the week before, I think it was on the 2nd of January, a letter was also issued by current Agong Sultan of Johor to say that any pardon application needs to go through the pardons board. He will have ultimate decision on whether he wants to listen to the recommendation of the pardons board or not, right? So that was something that Anwar referred to in sort of like a brief engagement with the press, and this was, in my opinion, a way in which Anwar could deflect the questions to do with the royal addendum that he knew was going to be released to the public via Najib's people, including Najib's lawyer, Tan Sri Shafi Abdullah, the following week. Right. So what this letter from the Sultan of Johor, the current Agong, did was to give Anwar cover to say that regardless of whether there was a royal addendum or not, any applications for house arrest, for pardons, for whatever appeals that people wanted to make for Najib needs to go through due process by which he will have his own say as well. Right, so I think this is clearly political cover for Anwar. And what we saw the following week on a Monday, to coincide with the hearing in the Court of Appeal on whether or not Najib has the right to undergo house arrest based on this recommendation by the previous king. That letter was issued by the Pahang Palace. Right, and on the same day, the Court of Appeal did decide in favor of Najib for Najib's case of wanting to, make the application for house arrest based on what the previous king, put forth in the royal addendum. The Court of Appeal decided in favor of Najib. Right, so what this doesn't mean is that this doesn't mean that if Najib hearing of the case in the High Court is favorable, that means he definitely will be released from prison and undergo house arrest. There still needs to be due process. There still needs to be, this proper application of what we mean by the pardons board and whatnot. So likelihood of Najib being under house arrest, I don't think is very high because this Agong has clearly said that application has to be submitted freshly to the pardons board, and ultimately he will have to make a decision. So is that clear enough for you, Peter?
Yeah, that's clear. But I guess the biggest question here is one that is quite hot in town right now, is that people are asking why no response from government earlier, and it seems like there is an intention to hide this royal addendum. And I think that's the one thing that everyone is questioning right now, and especially after Kyrie came up with his podcast talking about it, it became even hotter right now, right? So what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I think that it is quite clear from people monitoring this case, including myself and others, that the royal addendum came in only later or was sent to certain people only later. And this was not part of the formal submission to the pardon board. Meaning the pardon board only received the letter from the then king to say that, firstly, the jail sentence is going to be reduced by half. Secondly, the fine is going to be reduced from 210 million to 50 million, right? So this is where the discount issue came into play. And I think it's very clear that the pardons board acted on that recommendation by the king at that time. The royal addendum came later, but because it was unsigned, it was not sealed, it wasn't entered into the proper process in the pardons board, so they couldn't consider it, right? And I think at that time, the government did not want to confuse the picture anymore by saying that there was a royal addendum, right? So, I think the government basically just ignored the royal addendum. Of course, Saifuddin Nasution, the Home Minister, has come out to say that the Prisons Board never received the Royal Addendum. So I'm not sure where this Royal Addendum was sent to. Was it just given to Najib's son? Was it given to somebody in the administration? We just do not know, right? But what we do know is that somehow people managed to get a copy of this, Royal Addendum, and it was leaked. And then, of course, this has been confirmed recently, earlier this week by the, Pahang Palace, right? So, you are right. I don't think the government has been totally transparent and forthcoming about this addendum. But in a way, I do understand some of the constraints they felt because they couldn't be seen as not really following the orders of the then king. So, my personal preference is always to be more transparent whenever you can, so that you don't have to pick up after yourself later on when the truth is revealed. And I think maybe this is a case whereby either Anwar himself or the Federal Territories Minister, Zalina, should have come out to make certain clarifications, maybe together with the Law Minister, Azalina, to give the case a little bit more solid legal backing. And then, to make things clear so that we know what is the due process that was not followed, and then what is the due process that needs to be followed moving on if, Najib wants to make another fresh application for either pardon or house arrest or whatever it is, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think for this particular issue, right, one thing interesting is that I did ask around, like, hey, what are some of the questions that you want to ask about this, right? Because I know that we're going to do this podcast today. And a friend actually sent in this, right? He said, hey, why everyone is so secretive, which we already answered the first one. And the next thing is that, why at the same time, so coincidental that there's a mention in the budget about amending law to allow home detention, when literally nothing was mentioned about this in the GE15 campaign. I guess this is a bit of a sarcasm as well, huh? Yeah, on PH or even the Unity government side, they own election promise also find it hard to fulfill, but now they want to do something which no one is asking for. Yeah, so what are your thoughts about this?
Firstly, I don't think it is quite accurate to say no one is asking for this. I think there are clearly elements within UMNO who is asking for this, because Bosco is still quite popular within UMNO. But there lies also another challenge that UMNO is facing themselves, which is some people want to move away from Bosco, and to be able to move away from the 1MDB baggage. Others, maybe they still want to fight the fight for Najib, and that's why they are continuing to pressure UMNO President Zahid Hamidi to make sure that Najib gets a fair hearing within the Madani government. I think the other thing I want to highlight is the fact that UMNO as a whole, through the leadership of Zahid, decided to initially hold a protest or a public gathering to support Najib on Monday, the day when the Court of Appeal was going to make its decision on this addendum. But then, after the Agong, the Sultan of Johor, came out with his statement to say that any due process needs to go through the Pardons Board and he will have to decide, Zahid Hamidi, UMNO president, decided to call off the UMNO's participation in that gathering. And of course, this did not prevent some of the UMNO youth leaders, including Akmal, to Dr. Akmal, to go there and to use that occasion for his own political mileage. But ironically, present at the same gathering were Perikatan national leaders, including Bersatu and PAS, although Muhyiddin wasn't there. But many of some of the prominent leaders from Bersatu and PAS were there, including the MB of Selangor, including the Deputy President of Bersatu, and others as well. So, in a twist of fate, you get a situation where Bersatu and PAS leaders seem to be supporting Najib, whereas the UMNO leaders were not present there to support Najib, which is very, very strange. What did you make of the whole thing?
It's almost, maybe I may offend certain people when I say this, it appears a little bit clownish. What do I mean by that is it seems like people are in a very interesting situation, right? Where they can't be entirely transparent, but they can't afford not to be. And they are forced to take stands in a very awkward position right now. Because with the multi-parties, parties not as in political party, but different people getting involved, right? It kind of puts them in this position where, like, for example, the case of Zahid, standing up so strong talking about it, and then once our current king come out and then say something, you gotta like, oh, okay, because there's another bigger voice, let me back out a little bit. I also don't want to offend this person. So everyone is trying very hard to play their cards right at this point, because there's certain touchiness to this subject, because ultimately it's also a royal pardon. Yeah. And we all know the 3R is something that you shouldn't be touching. So people are not asking certain questions already. You can only beat around the bush or very questions that we know will not be able to get to the bottom. So I think this is a method where we'll just lose steam after a while. Although a lot of excitement. Okay, but I think more importantly, right, is a lot of podcasts, a lot of people have already covered the subject of this addendum. And some are throwing accusation who's trying to hide this and so on. But I think maybe it's a good time to actually remind people why Najib holds such a strong crowd to support him, despite the fact that he's already in jail, despite the fact that internationally, this whole news kind of brought a very, almost in a way, brought shame to Malaysia, right? But yet, he still has such a strong grassroots supporter base. Maybe can you just refresh our memories, right, on this very weird phenomena?
Sure. So firstly, why do I think Bosco is still popular in a very grassroots kind of way? I think, one of the reasons is because he embraced the whole Bosco notion that, he is still somebody to be reckoned with, in the sense that he's almost like a social phenomenon when he was not yet thrown in jail. Going from place to place, wearing different meme jackets and whatnot, almost playing on the caricature of him as being this gangster who is out there defying the law, so to speak, right? And being very shameless about it. That's one. And sometimes people like to have this kind of supporting the rascal kind of sentiment, right? So that could be one reason. I think another reason is Najib, I think, reminded a lot of people of a time that was at least in their minds more prosperous, a time where cost of living wasn't so high. This pre-COVID where the economy was also growing very strongly, and a time where there was much less political uncertainty because BN and UMNO was much stronger at the time. So there are, I think, some people who latch on to that kind of notion, and that's why they support Najib for what he represents. And I think probably the third reason would be, wanting to perhaps see the re-emergence of UMNO as a strong entity, to shore up a very strong Barisan Nasional, so that, the kind of Malay dominance that you had under UMNO before can be re-exerted. So these are, I think, the three main reasons. Different people may prioritize or place importance on one over the other. And then the second area I want to talk about is the implications, the political implications. Because I think not supporting the public rally for Najib by, not coming out so strongly, in response to the addendum, Zahid, I think, hasn't done himself any favors, in the sense that I think this will be used against him as and when there is a new leadership elections in UMNO. But at the same time, in the short term, I think he's done his part in trying to decrease the pressures on Anwar and also on this unity government to not want to make Najib an issue whereby the government can be sort of like toppled. Because I think this could be seen as a way in which the opposition parties were trying to use this issue to destabilize the government, and perhaps to use it as an excuse, although it's not likely to happen, to say because this government led by Anwar did not follow the orders of the previous king, then they are guilty of going against the royalty, and then because of that, Anwar should step down. That's not going to happen, right? But I think this is something that we should realize, and we should also acknowledge that the opposition has not really been very honest in terms of how they are using this whole addendum.
Another thing that I think is really interesting is the way the people think. Because when they were saying that, I can understand the part that it relates back to the glory days of UMNO. But on the other hand, they should clearly know that the whole fall of it was because of this whole 1MDB issue, which the very same person that they hope to revive the glory is the very same person that caused the downfall. On the other hand, as we are talking about this that time, I got a little bit concerned for another political figure that you mentioned earlier, is Zahid. I think he's in a very awkward position right now. If Bosku gain even further support, he's in an awkward position. But he's also in an awkward position that he cannot don't support. And even if he don't support, his benefit in his career journey as a politician has already come to kind of like a bottleneck or a place that's a bit stuck. So he's in a really difficult position. The guy come out also a problem. Don't come out also a problem. Yeah, so what are your thoughts about his political future?
I think Zahid is just holding on to dear life. He is there to support Anwar because Anwar gives him cover. He would want that to continue until the general elections that's due in 2027. If he wants to continue as UMNO president, probably he will postpone the party elections to after the 2027 general election and then see whether he can hold on after that. If he can't hold on, I think what he would want would be some sort of a guarantee, from whoever is the UMNO president that will replace him. And if, let's say, Anwar can continue on as prime minister, that even if he steps down from being UMNO president, he will not, be prosecuted or persecuted. Right. So that's basically self-preservation at his best, which means that the ability for Zahid to try to revive the popularity of UMNO before the next general election is very, very low. So I think that is something that, UMNO leaders know, but they are powerless to do anything about it because Zahid will move against them, just like the way he moved against Khairi and Shahrial and Hishamuddin and the rest.
Yeah, I think the last question that I have is that it looks like there's a growing dissatisfaction that's becoming louder and louder in UMNO. My question to you will be, if Zahid were to step down, who do you foresee will be someone that will likely be in competition for this particular position?
So, some possible names would be the current Deputy President of UMNO, Muhammad Hassan, who is the Foreign Minister. But I think his own demeanor on a lot of issues hasn't really been very strong. And maybe his own performance as a foreign minister has also not been particularly outstanding. So I'm not sure to what extent that will affect his chances in a negative way. The second person that would throw his name into the hat would be Johari Abdul Ghani, the Minister from Plantations and former second finance minister. I think he has the resources, the skills, and the abilities to be able to make a good bid or push to become the next UMNO president. And then the third person is probably a dark horse, who is Hishamuddin Tun Hussein, who is still very much on the sidelines, having been suspended from the party, but still a member of parliament. He has been very quiet and just biding his time. So those are the three main candidates in my opinion. Maybe with the exception of Johari Abdul Ghani, I don't think the other two would be very important or influential in being able to revive the fortunes of UMNO in the larger political ecosystem. And I think maybe under Hishamuddin, I think there will be room for Khairi and Shahrial to come back into the party if they choose to do so. I think under Johari Abdul Ghani, there is a chance, but maybe less than if, let's say, Hishamuddin was the president. And then under Tokmat, probably the least chances, because Khairi, I think, has not really engaged with Tokmat ever since Tokmat took his Rumbau parliamentary seat. Alright, so I think a lot of complicated issues that will continue to affect the internal dynamics of UMNO and also within the Madani coalition. We'll be right back after this to talk about the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. Be right back. Welcome back to the Are We OK podcast. For this second segment, we're going to talk about the recently signed Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone agreement that was signed on Tuesday, 7th of January, by the leaders, witnessed by the Prime Ministers of Malaysia and Singapore, and signed by the Minister of Economy, Rafizi Ramli, on the Malaysian side, and Mr. Gan Kim Yong the Minister for Trade and Industry on the Singapore side. Yeah, my initial thoughts on this agreement, I'll share the positives first, Peter. I think the first thing to note is, they announce the sectoral focus by areas. And I think this is something that is, interesting because people would then be able to look at the areas that they want to invest in and be able to prioritize some of the sectors according to the area. So for example, there's going to be forestry, financial services, we know this already. In areas such as Pasir Gudang, where there's the port, manufacturing, energy, logistics. In JB City Centre, there's going to be business services, digital economy, health, and then in Iskandar Putri, manufacturing, health, tourism. So yeah, it's good that they highlighted different areas and different sectors to focus on. I think that's something that is an upgrade from the initial MOU that was signed in January of 2024. So that's the first positive I want to highlight. The second positive is that there have been some framework for incentives as well as initiatives. On the part of the incentives, and this was announced I think a day later after the signing of the JSSEZ. This is the incentive package that was announced by the Johor State Government together with the Ministry of Finance, federal government, which is the special corporate tax rate. This is for companies undertaking new investments in qualifying manufacturing and services activities such as AI, quantum computing supply chain, medical devices, aerospace manufacturing and global services hub. We shall get a special tax rate of 5% for up to 15 years. There are also additional tailor-made incentives for JSSEZ, and then also a special tax rate for knowledge workers, comprising eligible knowledge workers working in the JSSEZ of 15% for 10 years, right? Yep. So, this is, I think, an interesting development. Related to the initiatives would be what was in the joint media statement between the two ministers, and this from an incentives perspective would be the notion that there would be 50 projects where they will promote and facilitate the expansion of within the 5 years, and then another cumulative 100 projects within the first 10 years that will bring about 20,000 skilled job opportunities in JSSEZ. And these projects may include, for example, renewable energy projects that can be generated in Johor and part of it perhaps exported to Singapore. So the initiatives part and also the incentives part is the second thing that caught my attention. And then the third part would be the fact that people see this the policy holders see this document as one that can be constantly or regularly updated, right? So, for example, in the joint statement, they did say that it is something that they want to review regularly, and that they are open, for greater areas of cooperation and initiatives, and that they would also upgrade the Joint Ministerial Committee for Iskandar Malaysia, JMCIM, to support the ambition and implementation of the JSSEZ. Right, so there is I think clear momentum that has been provided for by the MOU that was signed in January last year, and then further enhanced by this agreement signed earlier this week on the 7th of January 2025 in Putrajaya. Yeah, your thoughts on the JSSEZ?
I think the whole idea of JSSEZ, I think it's a fantastic thing. I read about the tax incentive. It makes it very attractive for many people. The idea of 15% income tax for knowledge worker made me feel like maybe we should actually move our whole company down and open there and then see whether we qualify, right? Jokes aside, I think more importantly, it's the question of implementation. Now, one thing you mentioned earlier is the ministerial committee, between two countries, right? Because this is rather complicated. You are actually talking about two countries coming together implementing a special economic zone. So it's not like Malaysia sovereign only, it's quite a lot of things involved. And we have always known that Singapore as a government, they have always been a very efficient government, very well streamlined workflow, but Malaysia, on the other hand, we tend to have challenges when it comes to coordination between different ministry, right? So my question is, when you are talking about SEZ, there's a lot of coordination between ministry. It's not just MITI driving it. You need MOF driving it. There will be transportation. There will be even housing development, because one of the biggest beneficiary there will definitely be property development, building of infrastructure, where those are things that's going to happen. So my question, right, is that what kind of speed will we be able to see? And will we be able to see through all these things?
Yeah, so I think the implementation question is one that others have also raised. And I think one of my concerns is that within the JSSEZ agreement, there isn't a proper outline or timeline or some sort of a structure beyond the Iskandar, Joint Management Committee, which has been going on for quite a number of years. That there isn't this kind of very well-defined program whereby certain agencies or ministries on the Malaysian side as well as the Singapore side has been identified to follow up on some of the issues, right? So,
that's right.
For example, if let's say you want to talk about incentives for these 50 projects or initiatives, is there going to be some sort of a working group formed between EDB in Singapore and then also the Ministry of Economy and MIDA in Malaysia, right? Because this is where I think you need alignment from a perspective of investment facilitation, including funding, right? So, and then, other than the Johor Skills Development Corporation, which is a state entity, are there going to be other entities or agencies such as Talent Corp on Malaysian side, the Ministry of Manpower on the Singapore side, to be in a working group, a formally announced working group to implement some of these things, right? So I think the lack of clarity on this front is something that still can be addressed. You can update or you can make further announcements, policy announcements that is consistent with the language of the JSSEZ agreement at a later date. But, my preference would have been is better to show the market, show the private sector, show investors that you've already thought out these issues and there's broad alignment on the implementation side. So I think that's the first concern, the follow-up. The second area that I want to highlight and also like to seek your comments on this as well is the fact that there may not have been proper alignment on all things on both sides of the border. And I'll give you a very specific example. One of the areas that Rafizi was quoted as having said and also put in a presentation that was shown to journalists the week before the signing of the JSSEZ is the idea that, or the proposal that the Malaysian government would establish a fund to support infrastructure development in the JSSEZ. And then the Singapore government would design or come up with the funding to facilitate Singapore companies' expansion in the JSSEZ. So the funding, it seems, from this presentation would come from Singapore for the investment side, and then the infrastructure side, the funding would come from Malaysia. I think this was not communicated in the same way in the joint press statement between the Ministry of Economy as well as MTI, the Ministry of Trade and Industry on the Singapore side, which shows me that the expectation from Malaysia is as such, meaning infra we fund, investment they fund. But for Singapore, right, I think they are much more careful about these kinds of commitments because they also have an electorate that they need to be answerable to. right? So I think when these kinds of lack of alignment can be seen by people like me who follow the issue quite closely, would there also be similar concerns that would be expressed by the private sector? And even maybe some people within either the Singapore side, the MTI, or on Malaysia's side, other ministries, which are not the Ministry of Economy. Right? So I think this lack of alignment is something that I wanted to highlight and get your thoughts on.
I think when it comes to this area, I do not know, because it seems like when it comes to communication between two countries, it's quite challenging lah. I don't know why is it so challenging, but I suppose by nature it is challenging. Just that I think it needs to be handled better, because it's easy to talk, but to really get it done, it's a whole different ballgame altogether. Now, having said that as well, if this really gets done, I think it's a great thing, because it opens up to a lot of Malaysian companies to be open for funding. You are exposed to a bigger international market to a certain extent, because what happens is that in the past, many companies, when they're doing quite well, they'll move to Singapore. In fact, the truth is, in the startup world today, if you're doing quite well in Malaysia and you need to raise global funding, people will tell you, go and move to Singapore. That's the first thing. And that's the reason why a lot of startups move there, right? My hopes is that SEZ will be able to at least reduce this. And we can say that, hey, it's kind of like the Delaware kind of thing, right? Yeah, that's the hope lah. But going back to your question about this communication thing, I don't think our ministers have the bandwidth to do this at this point. Because there's so many issues, right? The main guy who's responsible will be Ministry of Economy, Rafizi. He has so many things in his hand. You're talking about petrol subsidy reduction. You're talking about a lot of things at this point. So many things. And then SEZ, it is not top-line discussion anymore, no. It is implementation discussion, which means details. It means a lot of meetings, a lot of attention given. So the question is, who can be in charge? Now, I think that it's very important that our government come up with a special committee that is in charge of this, that kind of like maybe go into every single ministry, pick the right guys, a team for every single one, and form a mini committee. And this committee shouldn't just comprise of representative from Malaysian ministries, but from Singapore ministries as well. So let's say we have someone equivalent ministry lah, right? I think you get what I mean, right? Like from trade side, MITI have one representative, your side have one representative. But these people are empowered to actually run things, and reports directly maybe to the minister directly and to PM directly. So what happened is that things get to move faster, and you really see this happening, because let's be honest, my personal thought is also, I think at this point there's a lot of political will to run this, because of our current king is from Johor. I am not sure whether this is sustainable when our current king finishes his term. We need things to be fast. That's my thought.
To respond to that, I think if let's say we create enough momentum in the next 3 to 5 years, this project would have legs and be sustainable beyond the tenure of the current king. That's one. I think the second thing is, the process that you outlined just now, right, is actually already there in terms of the working groups that were formulated within each country and between the two countries to discuss things like ease of doing business, for example. That one, I know that MITI and MIDA were leading that initiative. There's also a working group to look at talent development. And I think we saw a little bit of that being announced in the JSSEZ. So there are, and there will also be working groups for the movement of people, working groups for the movement of goods. And these working groups can easily be enhanced and should have, I think, in my opinion, put into the agreement in an appendix to show how these implementation steps are going to be undertaken. This will give a lot of confidence to the private sector who are going to be investing in the JSSEZ, and then at the same time be able to answer questions that people like you and me are asking now: who's going to be in charge and all that lah. So just as a sort of like a footnote to this, in the joint statement between NTI and the Ministry of Economy, they did say that there's going to be a time frame whereby both countries will work towards the ratification of this agreement by Q3 2025. So I think that's where all these kinds of details need to be confirmed at the working group level, and then perhaps escalated not to the Prime Minister, because I think that's a little bit too senior already, but it could be escalated to the Joint Ministerial Committee for Iskandar Malaysia, which is going to be repurposed, because that has representatives from not just the Malaysian federal government, but also the state government. The MB of Johor sits in this Joint Ministerial Committee, right? So that could be one sort of like reporting structure at the working level. So, this is what we're waiting for, and this is, part and parcel of the implementation framework that we should look at. Maybe one last point, I think, also in terms of implementation, would be some of the other MOUs that were signed, on the sidelines of the JSSEZ and included in the joint statement. So I'll read you a few. One would be MOU on the Carbon Credits Corporation, and this is signed between Gan Kim Yong on the Singapore side and Nick Nazmi on the Malaysian side, the Minister for Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability. So I think this one is the idea that there would be some carbon credits that can be put out there into the marketplace for both countries to reduce their carbon emissions. And this can be sort of like monetizable, if you will. And in Singapore, it is already monetizable through carbon tax credits, because they do have a carbon tax. And Malaysia, we're talking about the implementation of a carbon tax as early as next year, right? So this is one area where I think some implementation details needs to be sorted out. The other one is the MOU between Singapore's MTI and Malaysia's Ministry of Economy on cooperation in the field of cross-border carbon capture and storage, right? So this is CCS, as people have said, as people use that acronym. And again, it's part and parcel of the way to reduce the carbon footprint in both countries in ways that can be monetized. And then the third one, the third sort of like announcement on the sidelines of the JSSEZ is the commencement of the sale of 50 megawatts of renewable energy from Malaysia to Singapore. And this is part and parcel of the Energy Exchange Malaysia pilot project. This would include other players in Singapore side, as well as this is I think Sembawang or Semcorp, together with Malaysia's TNB, right? So these are, I think, details that we should highlight and monitor, in terms of how this can be implemented properly, and maybe be part and parcel of one of the 50 projects or initiatives that was highlighted in this joint agreement. So I think a lot of interesting things on this front. I think the private sector is very keen to see how they can start to work on the JSSEZ, put projects forth, ask the right stakeholders on both sides on what are the financial incentives, and I'm sure we'll be speaking a lot more about this particular project moving forward and further down the road. Any last thoughts to share about the JSSEZ?
Nothing much. I'm just quite excited to see it start taking shape in a more tangible manner, right? Because right now everything is still pretty much in talks. Because ourselves as a business, I would say it's a very attractive proposition. When I say that, maybe moving the company to Johor, if it's attractive enough, that could really happen, right?
Maybe you can incorporate the company, new company in the JSSEZ or the Special Financial Zone to get certain incentives. But right. Of course, this means promise of job creation in the JSSEZ, which I think is good for the service ecosystem in Johor, which I think has suffered a lot of brain drain to Singapore over the past decades. So this is a good way of perhaps not just stopping the brain drain, but perhaps make it into a brain gain policy by attracting both Singaporeans as well as non-Singaporeans at the higher level to come and establish businesses and to grow their business in the JSSEZ ecosystem. So with that, I'd like to end this section and then come back and for the final section, we're going to talk about two issues, which is the Chief Justice speech at the opening of the legal year 2025 and also Indonesia being approved as a full BRICS member faster than Malaysia. So, we'll talk about this in the final segment. Be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast for this final segment of this episode where I am dialing in from Singapore, and we're going to talk about the speech by retiring or soon to be retired Chief Justice Tun Tengku Maimun at the opening of the legal year of 2025. This speech was made on Monday, the 6th of January, even as at the same time as people from the opposition parties and also from some people from UMNO Youth were gathering at Putrajaya in front of the Palace of Justice. Before I go into the details, did you read any news coverage about this speech or not?
Yeah, I think the one that made the headline is the one about her asking the people, who are you to question the faith of others? Yeah, that was quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that was made in the context of a lot of people, attacking her and her husband, questioning their Muslim faith for different decisions that she made as Chief Justice. That definitely, I think, gained her a lot of support. In her speech, you can see that she's clearly motivated by her faith, by the fact that she is ultimately answerable to Allah, answerable to God, over her actions, and she loses no sleep over the decisions that she's made as Chief Justice. I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight was the fact that the Chief Justice actually quoted Anwar, during his time as opposition leader in 2009, when he was debating and discussing the Judicial Appointments Committee, to sort of like almost as if she is reminding Anwar of the promises that he made as an opposition chief, right? So for those of you who are not so familiar, the Judicial Appointments Committee, the legislation was actually done under Pak La before he stepped down as Prime Minister in 2009 to make way for Najib after the not so stellar results of the 2008 general elections, right? So the Judicial Appointments Committee is made up of distinguished people from the legal fraternity, and this is people who are nominated and also put forth to be considered to be part of this Judicial Appointments Committee by the King, right? And what is interesting is, I think what the Chief Justice may have wanted to remind the Prime Minister of, and I'm going to quote what she said. I'm certain that now, as Prime Minister, Dato Sri Anwar Ibrahim and his government will remain true to those commitments by continuing to unreservedly remain committed to upholding the cause of judicial appointments. Right? This is when she was referring to what Anwar said 15 years ago when the Judicial Appointments Committee was formed in 2009. Right? And I think one of the reasons why she may have wanted to raise this particular issue for the Prime Minister's attention, right, is that there may be a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister by certain parties, certain quarters, to appoint a new Chief Justice who's seen as more pliable, more cooperative, more willing to, bend the wheels of justice, so to speak, because of political pressure, right? And I think she wants to stop this from happening because she's done her level best over the past past 7 years since she was appointed in 2018 to make sure that the judiciary can be rebuilt, the reputation and the integrity of the judiciary can be rebuilt after what happened to it during the Mahathir 1.0 years lah.
Yep.
I think this is a very significant speech, and I'll be watching closely to see how not just the judicial appointments committee members will be filled, but also what are the recommendations that will be made. Of course, the Prime Minister himself has ultimate authority in terms of recommending these high-level, judicial officers to the King for his consideration to be approved. And yeah, it's a good test, again, a good test for the Madani government on whether they are going to do the things that they said that they would do when they were in opposition.
I think it's quite interesting when she mentioned that to remind our current PM. And I think as she is soon to be taking a leave, she would have been observing a lot of things happening, right? A lot of power struggles, so to speak, or recommendation propositions. My question to you will be this. Do you have anyone in mind that you think that are some of those candidates that are in consideration at this point?
Yeah, I don't have, because I'm not that familiar with the legal fraternity. But I'm hoping that we can get others, who are lawyers and familiar with the legal fraternity to come on board to give their thoughts on this. Of course, it's a bit sensitive, especially for sitting lawyers, to give their opinions on who is suitable or not suitable to be Chief Justice, because they have to go out and sometimes argue cases in front of these judges. So most of the time they will only share their opinions in private rather than coming out in a podcast. But it's okay. I'm hoping to be able to secure other guests who are perhaps lawyers as well as politicians or lawyer politician to come and share their honest points of view on this and other related reform issues in the near future. So keep posted, and I'm sure we'll have good surprises for you.
Maybe you should invite her to our podcast.
Possible. Some people have suggested others as well. I think one name that was proposed to me is a friend of yours, a lawyer by the name of Nirmalan.
I see.
This is Nirmalan Devaraja. Shout out to Nirmalan, who was your, I think, schoolmate of yours.
Schoolmate. Nirmalan is a schoolmate of mine.
So watch out for this. Continued developments in the legal space, in the judiciary, and I'm sure that there'll be more interesting developments further down the line. Hopefully for the for the positive in terms of institutional and judicial independence, and that would be something that the Madani government hopefully can use to as part of its narrative, institutional reform narrative. Peter, the last issue I want to bring up today is the fact that Indonesia has been accepted as a full member of BRICS, the first new full member to be accepted in 2025. This is the year where Brazil is the host of BRICS, the BRICS summit, and maybe for the leaders' knowledge, Indonesia has done a 180-degree turn with regards to BRICS. Under Jokowi, I think he wasn't so positive or excited about wanting to apply to join BRICS. In fact, he wanted to put Indonesia in the OECD group of developed countries because that's where he wanted Indonesia to have aspirations to move towards, rather than to be caught in a situation where Indonesia is seen only as a developing country. But once Prabowo, was identified and later on won elections, even before he took office in October last year, he had already expressed interest for Indonesia to join BRICS. He sent his foreign minister for the BRICS conference in Kazan in Russia this year. And surprisingly, Indonesia is ahead of Malaysia in being accepted as a full member of BRICS, despite Anwar lobbying very strongly. Anwar visited Brazil last year. Anwar also visited Russia, although not for the BRICS summit in Kazan, but he had another event called the East Asia Forum that was conducted in Vladivostok, where he shared the stage with Vladimir Putin, Russian president. Despite Prime Minister Anwar visiting India as well as China many times, Indonesia is ahead of us in terms of getting the full BRICS membership. So what is your reaction to this?
So actually, I'm very surprised when Indonesia was announced as a BRIC full member. Yeah, the full member part is the one that kind of like took me by surprise, because I did not expect they move up to that so quickly. Because remember when Prabowo took over, it seems like he was much more friendlier with US, and they were maintaining a position to stay neutral. In fact, at the point, I felt that maybe they're taking a very good stance, right, to remain neutral. And I was a bit like, in Malaysia, maybe you should remain more neutral as well, right? Then suddenly, come out the news, full member. Like, then the next question is also this. Malaysia has been pursuing a very good relationship. But here's where I want to ask some clarification, right? Why is it they are ahead in terms of becoming a full member? Is it because Malaysia did not apply for full member position, but rather just a partnership position? Or is it BRICS want Indonesia more and they do not want Malaysia more? How's the process like?
Yeah, I think good question. Just to clarify, as far as I know, there is no sort of like formalized process for the acceptance of new members into BRICS. I think the only condition is that there has to be unanimous agreement among the member countries, and this would be the original BRICS countries, meaning Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, for accepting new members. The other condition that I remember reading about is that any country who has enacted sanctions against any of the BRIC member countries is not eligible to be a member, right? So I think this will take Singapore out of the equation, for example. Although Singapore never expressed interest in wanting to join BRICS, but it has imposed sanctions against Russia over the Ukraine war in Ukraine. Other than that, I'm not really sure about whether there's some sort of a vote or some sort of deliberation or discussion among let's say the foreign ministry in the original BRICS countries. I'm not sure whether or not it requires unanimous decision from the new members that were accepted last year. These are countries like the UAE, Ethiopia, and also Egypt and Iran. So we're not quite sure whether they would have to give unanimous consent. But I think what is clear is that the original BRICS 5 prioritized Indonesia over Malaysia, right? And this could be the fact that Indonesia has a much larger market. It is seen as the leader of ASEAN. The ASEAN Secretariat, the ASEAN headquarters is located in Jakarta. Generally speaking, in terms of middle power rankings, Indonesia is always seen as being more important compared to Malaysia, right? So I think that could be probably the key reason why Indonesia was accepted before Malaysia. I do believe that Malaysia will eventually get accepted. But I think from a diplomatic standpoint, this would definitely, would have cost Anwar some, foreign policy points in terms of co-fund, they call it points deduction, so to speak, because the efforts of courtship that he conducted so aggressively did not materialize into something very concrete. And in the area of foreign diplomacy and international relations, all these kinds of signaling matters, right? Because it matters who you are seen to be photographed with. It matters in terms of who is let into a certain group of countries or grouping of countries before others. So all these things I think point to the fact that Malaysia has lost out a bit, compared to Indonesia, and of course, if let's say Thailand, for the sake of argument, who has also applied to join BRICS and has been identified as a partner country, If they get in before Malaysia, then I think there will be a lot of concern.
Chinese.
Yes, correct. Lose face, yeah.
Lose face, yeah. I was wondering to myself, right? Malaysia also could argue the fact and say that, hey, actually, we did not apply to be a member country. We just wanted to be a partner.
No, I don't think that really applies because there is no application to be just a partner. You either indicate your interest to be a full member or you don't apply at all, right? Which is why it was quite interesting at the Kazan conference in Russia. There were a list of 13 countries that were named as possible partner countries. But at the start of the year or end of last year, some countries fell out of this list. For example, Vietnam, that initially expressed interest in wanting to join BRICS as a full member, did not even make the list. So I suspect that Vietnam, somehow along the way, they pulled out their application to be a full member of BRICS. They can, of course, apply later, but this could also be due to the fact that Vietnam doesn't want to be seen as being too close to BRICS because they want to make sure that they can convince President Trump that they are a useful ally in Southeast Asia. Right, so there are a lot of these kinds of complications even within the process of applying to be a member, being named as a partner country, and then later on being accepted as a full member of BRICS. And I think this is, for those who are interested in international diplomacy and foreign relations, something that we should, look out for and look closely at to monitor for future trends. Any other thoughts and questions about any other issues that has happened this week, Peter?
Nothing much, just that in relation to what we talked about in terms of BRICS and everything all, I was wondering, since the fact that right now you are in Singapore attending a conference, there should be a lot of questions being raised about ASEAN in Malaysia chairing it. But more importantly is that with the dynamics of BRICS, currently, one of the important ASEAN country is admitted as a full member. And at the same time, Trump is going to be inaugurated soon. How do you think this will affect the development of ASEAN? Because to a certain extent as well, within the ASEAN countries, there are some who are more friendly towards China, some more friendly towards US. But more importantly, there should be the question about ASEAN centrality. So how does all this work out together for making ASEAN a better place instead?
I think the principle of ASEAN centrality will continue regardless of who applies or doesn't apply to join BRICS. I think that the platform that BRICS provides can be a useful addition to the different international groupings that different countries are part of. And I think the proof of the pudding would be as and when BRICS is required to take a position on particularly a challenging topic. I think that is when probably the relevance and the usefulness of BRICS will be put to the test beyond what we see now. Because when it's just 5 countries, it's probably easier to manage. When the number of countries goes to 10 to 15, then I think the whole BRICS arrangement becomes much more complicated. But yeah, we'll continue to monitor this space, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot more interesting BRICS-related news that we'll talk about later this year. But before we go, I think there are a few other topics that we will cover in another episode, including, for example, the launch of the Visit Malaysia year by the Prime Minister, earlier this week, and we're gonna get a tourism expert to come and talk to us about different tourism trends, whether or not Malaysia, I think, can compete in this very crowded and competitive space, and how does she perceive ASEAN to be sort of like a tourism hub for the world. So yeah, a lot of interesting topics in the tourism sector to talk about, and this will happen probably in a couple of weeks' time. So I look forward to seeing you back in the studio again, Peter, next week, where we'll be talking about the more exciting issues and also important public policy questions that you guys will want to have answered. So see
that's
you
right.
and see you next week, and have a good week ahead.